which are trying to turn back the student movements, its achievements, and the struggles that you are raising in the interests of all the students of this country. I know that you have been very active through the struggle which started off with the 9th February arrests and the disruption on the campus. You were very active through the Occupy UGC struggle, and now on this admission policy, it seems almost like we are going back 40 years. Because I was in the Students' Union in 1972-73. That is a period which is literally 40 years, more than 40 years ago. And Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU, had just started at that time, and it had been started with the idea. It had been started with the idea that it would correct some of the problems which continued to persist in older universities in India, universities which still carried their colonial character. Because JNU was the one university which was started with the idea of a modern, liberal, democratic environment, and one in which it would really be representative of the student body and the youth of the country. Whereas the colonial ideas which had continued were always that of elite universities. I think there is a tragedy in our country that because we have failed to universalize school education, any student, even if coming from the most disadvantaged background, any student feels they are in an elite situation if they come to the university. Because only, I think, about 17 to 18% of students of the relevant age group actually reach universities in our country. And this is because, not because we don't have enough reservation, we don't have enough recognition that people have a problem in getting to higher education, but the fact that in less than 8 to 9% of SC, ST, minorities, women actually pass 12th class. You will not believe it, but 2 years ago, only 1,800 girls from the scheduled tribes sat for the CBSE exam. That is a shocking figure. And it is sometimes figures like these, when people say, oh, you know, there's no merit, is not being given a chance, reservation is being pushed forward. But please remember, 92% of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe children simply don't finish 12th class. So they're not even eligible for reservation. Now, it was with these ideas in mind that many of us who came at that time to JNU, I remember I was 24 when I came to JNU. I am now 70. And I'm still fighting for the freedom of education and the right of all children to have education. But at that point, when we came to the university and admissions were taking place, Sohail has already told you that was one of the first years of the proper admission for MAs and the integrated 5-year course, etc. So that the student body of the university was being enlarged at that time. And like all students' unions, I was a counselor from the School of Social Sciences. Like all student unions, we were very actively involved in assisting new students who were coming. Delhi was a strange place to come to, and also the university was at the old campus, down campus as it used to be called later, but we used to call it the old campus. And there was a desire to help out the young people who were coming and who would be joining our university. And it was there that we met this young boy who actually started the movement for a new admission policy. He was a Gujar boy. He had got 50% in his graduate examination in his BA. But Jawaharlal Nehru University had B+. 55% was the eligibility criteria. And so, whereas a boy from Doon School and St. Stephen's, or a girl from a convent school in Delhi and from LSR could easily be eligible for admission to Delhi University, this Gujar boy, who was the first in his tribe at that point to do his BA, was actually not even eligible to sit for the viva or to be called for interview. It is this which started the agitation. We decided to picket the center. I'm not going to name the center, but there was a center where this boy wanted admission. We decided to picket the center and stop the admissions. This is what the decision the union took. The decision was taken within a day and a half. Admissions were stopped on the 13th of July. And the university administration at that time, our vice chancellor was very well-known diplomat, G. Parthasarthi. He was the founding vice chancellor of this university, and he immediately said that, you know, if the students have a problem with this, we should talk to them. And so talks began and negotiations began. We had a delegation from the union, and we had representatives of deans and teachers on the other side. And in fact, I remember that the first day of the negotiations, G. Parthasarthi himself was there to ask us to work as well as we, harmoniously as we could all together, teachers and students and deans, and work out a solution to what he felt was a genuine problem. It is there that this whole discussion of points being given, weightages being given for the fact that you were born in a family or born in an area or educated in a region where you did not have the advantages that other children or other young people had. So that we would have a concept of excellence or achievement which would be more reflective of the real conditions in our society. And this was not for it, this was for you to be eligible to come for the interview. The weightage points were given for that. It was to get rid of that wretched B+, which didn't tell you that B+ for a person who's had all the advantages in life, and B+ for the first person in his tribe just did not count to the same thing. The achievement of the Gujar boy was way higher than B+, but it was not being recognized. It was not being recognized because you had a system of excellence which only looked at points, which only looked at numbers and didn't look at the reality of a situation. And therefore, this argument began. We had to actually counter a concept of merit, which I hate to say still is alive and kicking and very strong with us. Anyone who is upper caste, who is upper class, who is English speaking, who is male, who is not a tribal, has a far better chance of proving excellence than any of us who may have fought much harder. And I can tell you, as a woman of my age, I know you people are still fighting. Think what it was like for us when we didn't even have something like feminism to fall back on. We were simply regarded as zombies because we fought for our rights. So the idea that excellence is something which access to facilities and wealth and situation This was an idea that we were concerned in our negotiations with the deans and the teachers. This was the idea that we wanted to crack. We said that excellence should be judged by the ability of a candidate or of a young person to deal with the circumstances in which they find themselves and then arrive at a level of achievement. So that we don't look at achievement as a figure which is already there. It's not a standard which is sitting there. It is a standard which is created by every student who fights, and it is a standard which is created by every student body that unites to fight. And that is what we decided to. The first phase of our negotiation fell through. The negotiation stopped. I think it was on the 19th or 20th of July of 1973. The negotiation stopped because everyone said that no, we can't possibly have admissions on this basis. It would be impossible. You have to have a figure. You have to have a cutoff point. Because we're thinking of education as something from which we're keeping people out, not bringing people in. Whereas our union was concerned first and foremost with how we bring people in. Those who have been kept out, how do we bring them in? So even though the negotiations broke down, we appealed to the entire student body and appealed to all the students not to participate in any way in the admissions process until an agreement was arrived at. That agreement, I'm glad to say, was arrived at on the 24th of July. In other words, in a period of 10 days, the university actually had to come to an agreement because we did not allow admissions to take place anywhere. And I must say, this is something all of you must know also, this is something I learnt very early on, that when we are united, we can fight. But when we break up into groups and sections, etc., our goals may be the same, but we are not able to get our achievements because we get divided. So I think that is something which is very important to remember. Our differences we can always work out with each other. The point of on which we were agreed were two very major points which were written down in the letter that was finally sent to the Vice Chancellor and that was finally sent to all the schools. One was that student faculty committees of every center, except the school of, I think it was SIS, or no, it was languages. One of the schools had a central student faculty committee because their admissions used to be done centrally. The other schools, the centers used to conduct the admission. So we had, as Sohail told you, elected student representatives and representatives from the faculty. But we did have one other fact, which we insisted upon, which was that student members of the student faculty committee could be observers during the Viva. We said we will not interfere with the process of the Viva. We will not interfere with the grades that you give, but let us be observers. And that was significant, because I think just having students present there and having the whole process being transparent plays a very important role. A student is not penalized for having answered questions in Hindi or in not very good English. That doesn't matter. Similarly, being from a different background, not being familiar with a particular kind of approach and confidence that people have when they come from a particular class, those factors did not militate against the students. That was the first thing. The second thing was that all admissions had to be cleared by the student faculty committee before the recommendations could be sent forward to the offices for communication. So it was truly a collective effort. Admissions were a collective effort, and it was decided that the student faculty committees would determine how the policies and the cutoffs and how the cutoffs would be implemented and how the weightage points would be given, etc. All this was to be discussed within the student faculty committee. This was the second very important thing I learned, which was that the autonomy of a university has value only as long as the internal functioning of the university is democratic. Only then does autonomy have true value. Because if the students, teachers and the karamcharis, the people who make the university, if they are not part of the decision making and the implementation of the university, then autonomy only gives autonomy to the people sitting up there. And that is no good for any university, and it is no good definitely for the nation, which Jawaharlal Nehru said will be in, he said, if all is well with the universities, all will be well with the nation. It's written there under his statue. And I think all is well with the universities only when students, teachers and karamcharis function in a democratic environment and in a transparent environment, with the idea of opening the doors of the university and the gates of the university to all students, and not with this idea that we will keep out people so that we can retain our elite character. I want to thank you so much for your patient hearing. I am happy to be part of your movement, and I'm really grateful to you for carrying on the struggle that we began 40 years ago. And I do believe that we took the right decisions then, because all of you are here today. Thank you so much.